we are going to add a material and a texture to a vase model that we created before in a 3D modeling course. For now, let's activate the material preview mode so we can see the texture but not too heavy on the system. Make sure the vase object is selected and let's create a new material. I'll name it vase, but you can name it any name you want. For this material, we are not going to use any image texture, but rather a procedural texture to replace the base color. In this case, what I want to use is a procedural texture called Gabber. So just press Shift-A. Then, in the texture submenu, choose Gabber texture. If we plug the value output into our main material base color input slot, we can see the texture in a viewport. Gabber texture is commonly used for simulating wavy surfaces such as desert sand or ocean water, etc. By default, the texture is in 2D mode. What we want to use now is the 3D version of it, so change this to 3D. The scale value defines the size of the texture. I think I want to set this to 7 for now. You can always adjust it later if you want. Next is the frequency. As you can see, the higher the value, the denser the texture is. Let's set this to 5. Notice that currently the pattern is almost vertical, which is not suitable for our vase model. We want the pattern to be a bit tilted. To tweak the orientation, you can click and drag this sphere. But I find that this method is a bit too hard to control. I prefer to use numerical values that we can get from the mapping and texture coordinate nodes. So let's set this back to the default by hovering the mouse on top of it and then pressing the backspace key on the keyboard. Alright. Now, to create the nodes that we need, we can just select the main material node and then press Ctrl T. Again, we can do this because of the Node Wrangler add-on. We don't need the image texture node, and we only need the object's orientation as we are working with 3D procedural texture. I prefer to use the texture type for the mapping, and let's plug this into the vector input slot of the Gabber texture node. Now that we have the rotation parameter, we can try rotating the texture in y-axis coordinate to find the angle that we like. I think I'll just use 90 degrees for now. Next, we want the pattern to be more dense. Let's try tweaking the X-scale value. I believe 0.5 is enough for our needs. Okay, up to this point, you may be wondering, what if we want to use other colors than just black and white? There aren't any parameters to control the colors. Well, to map the color to any color that we like, we can use a special node called color ramp. We can just type ramp to search for the node, and here is the node. If we put a node on an existing connector, Blender will automatically place the node in between with all the connectors already plugged in. But let me move these nodes so you guys can see the connectors better. And let's side to side panel by pressing N so we have more space. Okay, so basically the color ramp node maps the darkest until the brightest input colors with any color that you like. For example, we can change the darkest color to purple color. So black is now purple. And replace the white color with an orange color. The reason why the node is called ramp is because it works like a gradient. If you drag the first node to the right, the purple color becomes more dominant. Vice versa, if we drag the white node to the left, the orange color becomes more dominant. For now, let's make the purple color slightly more dominant. Alright. Lastly, we want to use the Gabber texture to also control the normal map of the material. For this, we need a node called bump. Connect the value output to the height input slot. and then output the normal to the normal input slot. Currently, the bump effect is too strong. We need to turn it down quite a bit. For this, we can play around with the strength value. I think 0.2 is enough for our case. This is the result so far. Let me tweak the purple color again so it is slightly more prominent. We can try switching to the rendered view mode for more realistic lighting. I believe we already have a nice looking waves material. Remember that we are using a procedural texture, so we can always change the settings if we want to. For example, changing the scale value or other values, etc.